Ahojte moji milí tretiaci, vítam vás na ďalšej hodine. Priznám sa, že neviem ešte teraz 11. mája na deň výročia víťazstva našich hokejistov na majstrovstvách sveta, že či budeme mať hodinu spolu budúci týždeň alebo nie, takže pre istotu vám túto hodinu nahrávam dopredu. Takže ak budeme mať hodinu nie v škole, ale z domu, tak tradične vás teda poprosím pod linkom komentovať, samozrejme odpovedať na vaše otázky, ktoré máme, no a budeme pokračovať s ďalšou témou British Parliamentary System. Ak neviete, čo ďalej robiť, či sa učiť na písomku, alebo si robiť vypracovania, pozrite si túto predchádzajúcu hodinu, kde som to na začiatku rozoberal, takže rozhodnite sa vy. No, samozrejme, my uvidíme podľa toho, ako pôjdeme v škole a ako sa to bude vyvíjať. Dobre, budeme pokračovať teda ďalej, nejdem sa zdržať, lebo minule som vám natiaľ hodinu o 5 minút, tak dúfam, že dnes vám možno aj skrátim a uvidím, no pokiaľ. Každopádne my sme začali teda anglické revolúcie, prišli sme k vzniku konštitučnej monarchie, takže dúfam, že ste v podstate porozumeli tomu, že v čom spočívali ten princíp také kombinácie demokracie s monarchiou. Čiže keď som sa vás pýtal, či by ste chceli republiku alebo kráľa, tak bolo také možno, aby ste si porovnali, že krajiny ako Švédsko, Dánsko, Holandsko, Belgicko, Nórsko v podstate sú všetko monarchie, ale funguje tam demokratický systém ohromným spôsobom a vidíte, že ľudia aj v demokracii sú schopní si zvoliť kadečo, takže niekedy je dôležité, koho máme prezidenta, koho máme na ústavnom súde a akým smerom dokážu ľudia si v tých ďalších voľbách zvoliť možno nejakú opozíciu a to striedanie moci bude, poviem to, častejšie ako v prípade Ruska, Maďarska alebo napríklad Bieloruska a samozrejme potom určité nejaké slobody sa tam menia. Dobre, my budeme pokračovať a skúsim vám vysvetliť veľmi stručne, už dúfam, ako táto konštitučná monarchia sa vyvíjala, ako sa vytvoril v podstate systém politických strán, ktoré poznáme aj dnes a budeme ich rozoberať ďalej na dejinách USA, ktoré nasledujú hneď po tomto a dnes ich určite začneme. Uvidíme, pokiaľ prídeme. V podstate vytvorili takú ďalšiu vetvu alebo ďalšiu možnosť pre demokratickú formu vlády. No ale v podstate strany, ktoré vznikli v Británii a sa vyformovali, tak boli takými modelovými aj pre strany napríklad v Spojených štátoch a potom neskôr aj vo Francúzsku a v podstate dnes takmer všetky strany kopírujú tento systém. Dobre, so let's move on. I believe that we can move on with this thing. So what we talked about was this glorious revolution that changed the absolutistic monarchy in England from republic back to monarchy and eventually to constitutional monarchy. Of course, we had this, not constitution, but the Bill of Rights that was like basic act or basic list of acts and principles upon which democracy should work until today. What was England and Britain looking like? Actually, during this period, during this 17th century, England became great power not only in the seas but also in inlands, thanks to the development of capitalism and rise of manufacturers that, for example, Maria Theresa or Peter the Great, Tsar of Russia, tried to copy in their own countries, in our country, for example. England, thanks to this development in economy and trade, became powerful also in military, and it was since times of republic, also during times of constitutional monarchy, and during this period, England finally annexed Scotland and Ireland until the 21st century, so on. For that reason, the kings and one queen these days started to use this heraldic flag that expressed the royal houses of England with 3 golden jumping lions, as it is called in here, but also the Scottish royal flag with lily flowers and red lion, but also Irish lyre, that was harp, a musical instrument of Irish King Brian Boru from the 11th century. Still, maybe to persuade Scots and Irish that this kingdom should be worthy to follow and to be loyal to, and they realized that this idea of Commonwealth of Oliver Cromwell was actually nice because Scots and Irish used this power of England also for their own settlement, for enriching, for traveling to new colonies and so on. So despite it, Irish have been fighting the British or the English, and Scots may have another referendum for independence. But it's true that both of these nations, originally Celtic, this time already speaking English, became also very famous and very productive. For that reason, the Parliament passed an act in which the kingdom changed its name, and they decided to call it Britain as the island. Actually, Irish were not so powerful to proclaim, so since 1707, the Kingdom of Great Britain is created, and they combined two naval flags of England. That was the St. George's Cross flag and St. Andrew's flag of Scotland together. So during whole 18th century, the British ships were sailing with this flag. But what happened? We will learn about Napoleonic Bonaparte. This is one of the pictures of Napoleonic Wars. Is actually embankment of British troops in Portugal that tried to defend against invasion of French army of Napoleon Bonaparte. Spain, for example, failed. But what happened that during these wars against Britain, the Irish especially always were looking for help of enemies of Britain in both world wars to Germans, in this case to the French, and Scots also. These lily flowers actually express medieval alliance between Scotland and France in times of Hundred Years' War, for example. So the English felt that probably these guys, especially Irish, aren't so loyal to the British crown. So for that reason, in 1801, they changed the name of this kingdom again, and flag too, into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Since you know that Ireland is not Britain, because Britain is only this island with England, Wales, Scotland. Okay, together with Ireland and some small islands like Isle of Man, Isle of Wight, the Outer Hebrides or Norman Isles are called the British Isles. And this kingdom started to use new flag in which they used kind of combination of Irish flag that you may remember from these auxiliary sciences of history, and that is St. Patrick's Cross, which is actually Scottish cross but with English colors. But Scots felt like, come on, like we will be like in the backwards of the flag, so they decided to divide these white and red the diagonal St. Andrew's or St. Patrick's Cross like half to half. So if sometimes you try to draw this flag, this British flag, it was not correct if you realize that one red arm is always to the bottom, but in this on the right side to the up. Okay, so now Irish and Scottish flags are like simultaneously like moving like this. Okay, so interesting fact for us, but the point is that since the beginning of the 18th century, we are not calling this country England but Britain, and we will talk about British, not English. Since time, if I use the English, it will be the same mistake as when for the Soviet Union I would use Russia. It's not true. Just like for Czechoslovakia, only Czechs, you know, because there were also Slovaks, there were Ukrainians, there were Scots and Irish in here. Okay, something you don't have in your notes and would be mostly for seminar, but I'm going to explain it for you. Next school year, you're starting up with Anglophonic literature, which in the 4th grade it will be British literature. I believe that with Mr. Wood, we should be really happy for this, because he's like famous teacher, former teacher from university in Banská Bystrica. And you'll be reading many books, and among them will be even Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe was living in England in the late 17th century and beginning of 18th century, actually in the times when constitutional monarchy was already set up. And now this time England and United Kingdom of Great Britain started to rise and develop and evolve. And he realized one thing that he mentioned, and mentioned in this short text that I tried to fit in this text, despite Robinson Crusoe got nothing to do with this, but it expressed one interesting idea that is connected with enlightenment, that I had already been talking about this. So agriculture was still the bedrock of the economy, but the trade was increasing and more men and women were employed in industry in Britain than in any other European nation. Wealth, however, was unequally distributed, with almost a third of national income belonging to only 5% of population. But British society was not polarized simply between the rich and poor. And according to writer Daniel Defoe, there were 7 different and more subtle categories. The great, who lived profusely, okay, like high nobility. The rich, who lived plentifully, okay, let's say merchants, rich merchants, and landowners. The middle sort, who lived well, let's say burghers in the towns, merchants, intelligence, doctors, lawyers, and so on. Working trades who labored hard but feel no want. I would call it like the shop masters and former craft guild masters and craftsmen who were actually rich enough to be satisfied. The country people, farmers, who fare indifferently. So there were many people working the fields and plantations and the pastures for livestock, especially for sheep. And the poor who fare hard, so people like servants, miners, for example, maids in households, many people work in manufacturers, and the miserable that really pinch and suffer want. So I would say the poor people, beggars, vagabonds, and like various people who from various reasons were really in this way. This really, I would say, is similar to modern societies of 19th but even 20th century, despite you may not see it, but I would say that even today we can divide modern societies in these categories, and this happened because suddenly in England and Scotland you have more or less democratic system, not for everybody, for this 5% who can vote, who can elect. But then you give more and more people work, the economy is rising, and then you have more and more education coming. And this is something what Maria Theresa, Friedrich the Great, or Peter the Great, or Catherine the Great in Russia tried to do with Enlightenment. That these ideas in England motivated people that this is really changing. What was the result? From 1700s to 1740s, Britain's population remained stable at about 7 million and agricultural production increased. So although men and women from Defoe's 6th and 7th categories could still die of hunger and hunger-related diseases, in most regions of Britain there was usually enough basic food to go around. This was crucial to social stability and popular acquiescence in the new Hanoverian regime. Hanoverian regime is another name because later on this Orange family of Oranges, they with a couple of marriages, new marriages, they were connected to so-called Hanover, House of Hanover, that was actually Saxon Gotha Coburg family, who also had their families in Sveti Anton, here in Anton in Mansion, and actually Elizabeth II today, she's from one quarter she is Saxon Gotha Coburg family. So this is interesting, guys, and I help with Encyclopedia Britannica, as you can see, with italics the name, the April 7 when I used it, because Encyclopedia Britannica could have changed it, and available at, and you can click on it, of course. So this is how you should also do this text, and maybe it may be helpful for one of the tasks that you have in your assignment. Okay, let's move on, and this will be important thing for the policy, because we'll analyze also kind of like a foreign policy later on in the 19th century. But the House of the Parliament created so-called 2 houses. We call them also 2 chambers. Dve komory parlamentu, oni to nazývajú 2 parlamentné domy. There are 2 houses of the parliament. The first, an original one, that was created in this 1215 with Magna Charta Libertatum, and later on with more and more parliamentary members or MPs, and they were all nobles. That's why we call it the House of Lords, Snemovna Lordov. These guys, these people, these MPs were appointed by the king, and they were entitled with sire or sir. Today, House of Lords look like this, so it's a very famous building. Not many people sitting in here, despite many people were given this honorary title sire for promoting or propagation of English British culture around the world. So, for example, actor Sean Connery was given Ian McKellen, who acted Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. The Beatles, actually, so all of them they gave this document back to the Queen when England intervened in some military conflicts in 20th century. That's why only some of them still have some political rights, because gradually the second house of parliament, the House of Commons, či snemovňa bežných občanov, ale voláme to snemovňa reprezentantov zájmov, lebo rovnako sa bude volať potom aj časť Kongresu v Spojených štátoch amerických. So these are elected by people, and this is important because in this way you cannot see it because of my face, but it is different place with more people sitting around. These people are elected, these are not, and there are only few dozens of them, and they have only kind of like formal power, just like the king. So when these House of Commons, who are elected in the elections, elected by people, represent pure democracy, and they pass some act, it may be bad for the people, and there is kind of a check, security check for this act, that even the higher chamber of parliament, the House of Lords, has to approve it. And these guys are usually very educated and sometimes like rule formally, but this gave inspiration for many countries all around the world, including USA or Czechoslovakia and today Czech Republic, that they have two houses of parliament: the National Assembly, Národné zhromaždenie, and the Senate, or this kind of House of Lords. So many countries with real good democracy have two chambers of parliament in which when act must be proved, so it must be approved by both houses of the parliament, and people can express their will in two elections every 2 years, one for the Senate, the other for the House of Commons. In England, it is a bit different also from our system, because this House of Commons, these MPs, so members of parliament, are being elected in the districts. Actually, previous week, so for you 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were these House of Commons elections held, and even Boris Johnson was promoting not the party, but he promoted candidate for each district, that they believe that conservatives had really good candidate for each district, because people elect only in their district, and who wins even with 1 or 2 votes more than the Labourist party or Liberal party. So that winning conservative will be representing whole district, whole town in the House of Commons. But something that today, there are plans for referendum in Slovakia. If you want to pass it in here, it is very weird. But in England, it's not, because only in one simple district, if you make referendum, you can still check, not control, but check the work and responsibility of your representative in the House of Commons, and you can actually have a referendum and you may have new elections in here. So very different system, but still it is inspiration that you have voting right for the people who can elect. This voting right was given to more and more people gradually, but at the beginning, in this 18th century, there were two rivaling political parties: the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. Both of them had their nicknames. They were called Tories. That was a nickname of like people living in the countryside, who were like not rednecks or farmers, but people like living somewhere in the countryside and bit conservative. Liberals were wearing modern wigs at that time, but they added this age. Of course, later it was not so fashionable, but they started, and until today, Liberal Party is being called the wig. What is important, guys? If you had the English revolutions, I told you about 4 main fractions in the parliament: Presbyterians, Levelers, and so on. Then we had Daniel Defoe's division of seven basic social classes of England. And in here, from only upper classes, these Presbyterians were being represented by conservatives. So we can say that from this rich landholding class, this conservative party was created. And liberals were representing levelers and these guys, but they were not poor people. They were all intelligence. They were merchants who wanted to promote like freedom for everybody, but even protection of their own businesses, of their own money, and right to earn money in any form. With deforestation in Scotland, taking over the land in Ireland, even like slavery trade, slave trade with America and Africa and so on. So still, there were many people who missed kind of another political party for these lower classes that didn't feel like mocking like they're rivaling between Whigs and Tories and the battle royale. This is like beginning of the 19th century, I would say. So Napoleonic era or some years later. So what was the thing that what Daniel Defoe promoted? It was really changing in the 19th century because not only manufacturers, like we know from Shashkin, from Holic, from Banska Štiavnica, but especially here in Britain, we had new inventions like from locomotive, with steam engines, with coal mining. And these things started also make changes in agriculture, like mechanical moving machines, for example, sekačky. And these produced so much food that it was not needed, it was not necessary to keep so many farmers in here. So landowners were having more and more fields, and many people were traveling to moving to cities, to the towns where they worked in the factories that replaced manufacturers. And still many people working in here and created new social class that are not farmers, that are not miners, but people working with machines in those factories. And these people are completely different because according to the Bill of Rights, they are free. But they don't possess political right to elect. Because in England, if you want to vote, it's let's say in the 19th century, you must have not only age of 18, about 18, you must have residence, but this residence must have one chimney and two windows. What does it mean? You must have a house, not some semi-terraced house or some block of flats. And it means that you don't have annual income so high that you have right to elect, go for election. This is called the property census alebo majetkový cenzus. Znamená to, že voliť môžete podľa toho, aký majetok máte. For the people who held power in the parliament, it meant that people who are poor, easy to corrupt, can be abused and can vote for some radical ideas. What was the reason? Because at the end of the 18th century in France, these poor people seized power and they start to vote for crazy parties, crazy movements who start killing people like Jacobins. And this is something that English or the British wanted to prevent. So gradually they start giving more and more political rights, but those conservatives or liberals were actually refusing it. So for that reason, these workers, čiže robotníci, ako ich budeme nazývať, because they were working very bad, working and living in social conditions, so very often they went on strikes. What is strike? This is strike. You quit working and go to the streets, you demonstrate with transparents and you just refuse to work. Okay, you say, okay, so what? We just don't work. But for the owner of the factory, it means that for each day of not working, he's not producing, he's not selling, and he's not earning money. So sooner or later, these strikes can bring down whole factory, whole owner. So for that reason, they start to negotiate. But who are you going to talk to? To John? To Jack? To Will? To Tom? Okay, who are among these? So even workers very quickly realize that if they want to negotiate for justice and better conditions and against oppression, so they need to pick up some skilled, good rhetoric, well speakers, guys who can represent them and negotiate with the owners. So in the second half of the 19th century, so-called labor unions were created. These labor unions, alebo pracovné robotnícke zväzy, my nazývame dnes odbory, odborové hnutia. Odbory, labor unions were created and they negotiated for more rights for so-called blue-collar workers. If I had a white collar, it means I'm wearing a white shirt, so I'm working in some nice good job somewhere inside. But in factories, people work in so-called blue uniforms, blue shirts. Actually, I'm wearing black shirts in this way. So so-called these guys who were members of labor unions were these labor union bosses, alebo ich voláme odboroví predáci. So they realized quickly that it's easier or more efficient not to negotiate that every factory in Liverpool is negotiating by themselves, but sometimes it is much easier maybe to try to candidate in your district and persuade liberals, conservatives, or persuade the parliament to give more rights for the workers who can come to election, who can vote for you, and your political party can overwhelm the conservatives and the liberals and can make these changes actually from up, not from down. We call it this political influence from up, čiže politické zmeny z hora, not from down, alebo z dola, od ľudí. So in this way, this organization finally got united in the political party called the Labour Party, alebo Strana práce. We can call it today leftist or left group because in French Revolution there will be this division of political parties into the right and onto the left, according to what part of parliament or national assembly they were sitting. But the basic idea was that they believed that these leftist parties are fighting for social justice, for more equality, more freedom for all people, including women eventually, and even for more interference from state. Why from state? Conservatives didn't like interference of state because it means that Oliver Cromwell or the king or the parliament forces you to produce something that you may not like, or they can increase taxes and you have to pay more if you're a millionaire. So it's really a lot of money that you can invest instead of wasting giving to the poor. For liberals, even more because these merchants were restricted with high taxes. For them, low taxes or even no taxes are perfect. Okay, of course, both liberals and conservatives were changed a bit, not a bit, but a lot since the times of this 19th century. But the basic division of these three parties remained. So for that reason, you cannot see that again is in here that you have Labour Party. You cannot see, but behind my head in here there is red rose, and it became symbol of these guys because they're wearing these roses stuck in here. And even today, even Smer Ohlas are having small rose because they actually were inspired by these so-called social democratic parties. Liberals today are called liberal democrats, and these three, you cannot see it again, are conservatives. Still there is UKIP, that is modern form. So this is basic division: conservatives, liberals, and left, right and left, liberals and conservatives. Okay, so authoritarian, sometimes to more libertarian, from economy to political and civic rights. For that reason, today these are main political parties in United Kingdom today. As you see, Labourists still wearing these roses, conservatives with the three, liberals in here. But since they allow more and more people to come to elections, so they allowed even Scots or Irish to have their own political party. Plaid Cymru is Welsh. Scottish Green Party, UKIP, was a party that was fighting for Brexit, and they've actually prevailed. British National Party, something like our Slug National Party, Kotlebovci, for example. Sinn Féin was Irish party fighting for the independence of Ireland, what they managed to have. Scottish National Party in here fighting for independence of Scotland. But again, you have something modern, that is Scottish Green Party or Green Party of England and Wales. So you see that you have various parties, but basic division is that, for example, these nationalist parties or green parties are usually supporting laborists or liberals and making coalitions and creating more democratic regimes. This is how some journalists or some funny guys divided them in good tier to bad tiers in form, like if they can cooperate together and their point of view. So you have many of them. But this idea of two chambers of parliament giving voting right to more people, that not only according to property census, but again it's according to age census. It means if you have residence, let's say in Slovakia or Finland, and you are over 18, you have right to vote, go to elections, so in this way, a similar system was copied in many countries that were also constitutional monarchies or became, like Denmark and Sweden. And Finland, when they got separated from Sweden, they made copies of it. Norway sees independence also at the beginning of the 20th century from Denmark, and they had very similar form of government, just like in United Kingdom. So it was kind of a model political structure for that. So as you can see, we have the social democratic, as we will call them later, in every state, including Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all of them. Then liberal parties, various of them in each of the states. So-called Nordic Green, that we don't have it, and I would say that Progressivne Slovensko is similar to them, but a bit different, like between leftists and green. But I had it. Conservative in are definitely obyčajní ľudia. Oľano is more conservative. That's why KDH is not so important anymore in here. But they have also nationalist parties in here, and we have plenty of them in Slovakia too. Green parties, and we know that in green parties Slovakia is like really weak. So when I tried to look for that, I realized that not only in these northern countries of Europe, but anywhere from Portugal, Spain to Slovakia and Romania, we have similar political parties in which that today, when we go to elections for European Parliament, it was obvious that all the MPs or EPs, EPMs, yeah, that would be the proper name, realize that they share common ideas despite they're from various countries. So from green parties from Germany, Ireland, from Greece and Finland and Romania created kind of a big fraction in European Parliament that is Greens, okay? The liberals in here, then People's Party that are conservatives, progressive, but also socialists in here, Nordic Green that is different from Green or from progressives. Then there are conservatives that are really strong ones, they stronger and stronger, and independents that are kind of non-aligned, and Europe of Freedom of Democracy that is kind of nationalistic. Still, some members have no friends in here. So this is, for example, their opinions about various fractions, about their opinions about European integration, more or less. That, as you can see, Euro freedom of democracy is actually for disintegration of European Union, dissolution of it. For Euro, for example, same-sex marriages, that means like tolerance towards other people, Membership in NATO, if you want to get separated from USA, from American influence. Let's say free trade, and it is very different if you are fighting for these conservative and liberals or for the leftist, let's laborists, for example. What's your opinion about Putin? No, nobody likes Putin, only ENF. So these nationalists like Putin. So even concerning like statehood of Palestine in Israel, that if you believe that even despite your friends, you like them, but if they have some troubles, the only way how to help it is rather to give chance even to their enemies. So it's really difficult in here. According to this, I decided to give you also the size of political groups for each state, including, let's say, Czech Republic, that we have, for example, they have 3 people from Green Party, because there's a party called Pirates, Pirati, and they entered this one. And look at Slovakia. Slovakia, we don't have these greens and so on, but you have 2 people that are non-aligned, non-identified. Do you know who they are? They are UKIP from Britain, Matteo Salvini's nationalistic party from Italy. Despite he was Minister of Foreign Affairs, but every day over the Instagram he uploaded one quote by Benito Mussolini, founder of Italian fascism. From Slovakia, two people you try to guess, it's Milan Uhrik and Andrej Radačovský. So former members of Kotleba's party. Mr. Radačovský was the one that he accused this Andrej Kiska, and even this judge. He was found during like regular control of police with a machine gun or automatic rifle and cocaine in his car. And because he's a judge, nothing, he was no harmed. And Milan Uhrik, he was the most popular European representative, but because he's non-aligned, friend to nobody in here, even British or dislike them, so nobody's actually listening. So when he's shooting these videos, try to look at the video that is from upper cameras, from back. There is nobody sitting, so it's only for his own promotion, propagation of this political new party, Republica, which is funny because they're mostly for statehood. And this is something that I wanted to show you, that this is alliance of Slovak political parties to various fractions. Smer, I believe, even Hlas later on will be in the socialist part. As you can see that liberals, conservatives are in one that doesn't seem very liberal for us, but People's Party is like regular, like conservative Christian Catholic parties in here. Progressives are in Liberal Party, which is interesting. Smer rodina in this front with kind of Italian fascists and so on. But even Slovak National Party in here and Kotleba, nobody likes them because they are neo-Nazi. Nothing to say more about that, guys. Okay, before we move, okay, I can do this. Okay, so what is the evolution of political system of ideologies in mind map that I wanted to show you? And you have this picture, is kind of evolution from this Magna Carta Libertatum in medieval times, when you had for the first time limitation of the royal power, of the king's power. Gradually, as we have parliament being created, so more and more people were joining it as kings and monarchs, and Queen Elizabeth I needed support from merchants, from bishops, from clergy, from like townsfolks, and so on. Then we had these experiments in civil war and experiment Puritan Republic of Oliver Cromwell. But you know that it ended up with these blood reprisals, so we had restoration of monarchy, which ended up with glorious revolution and creation of constitutional monarchy. And since that time we have political system like in any other country of modern democracy. Interesting is that we had this Maria Theresa and Joseph II. At the time, there was no assembly. But later on, especially in the 19th century, even in Austria-Hungary, even in Russia, later at the beginning of 20th century, the monarchs, the kings, the tsars, the emperors realized that if they want to keep their power in the times of industrial revolution, times of invention of electricity, of radio, telegraphic connection, of airplanes and skyships flying. So people are more and more emancipated. They had to give some powers to assemblies of nobility. And from Hungarian assembly or Polish Sejm or Russian State Duma, which were 5 people, they gradually created a parliament of 100 people. At the end of the 19th century, your great-great-grandfathers finally seized right to vote. And it was not according only to possession census, but even poor people, only if you had residence, if you had address, in 1910 you could elect in the elections. Unfortunately, not Slovak representatives, because there was very strict nationalism in our lands. The same in Russia. In Russia, they didn't have this age census, only possession census. Only 4% of population had right to vote. And that's why people started out with revolutions in more countries, especially from France. Since it started in France, it was inspiration for Germans, for English again, so-called Chartist movement, for Labour Party, for Social Democratic Party of Hungary, from which even Czechoslovak Socialist or Social Democratic Party rise, Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, Smer and so on, even for today. So who really holds the power in a democratic country? that Britain didn't have to be at that time, but gradually they were evolving, developing this system. Is it this guy? You maybe know this, Baker Street number 10, which is the seat of the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, now Boris Johnson, of course. Actually, he's approved by political parties elected to British Parliament in here. But how can you sit in the British Parliament, this beautiful neo-Gothic building with the Big Ben, next to the Towers Bridge? It's people, because people can decide. You think that your vote cannot decide. Marian Kotleba got to district president election when he seized only like 200 votes more than Vladimir Manica. At the day, on the day, it was the only election I didn't go for election because it was heavy raining and I was ill. I had like a headache and fever, and I just decided not to go there. I believe that everybody, but 200 people did so, and actually we had Marian Kotleba, which in New York Times, in all the world, were writing that Slovaks elected neo-Nazi, in here. So you can vote, and especially when you organize, when you are active, and you let know, when you participate, you can change it. You can go, you can talk to people, you go for election, you can speak loud, you can go for demonstrations. When you go to the stage and you do this, so it's really important, and this way you can create this system of justice if you feel injustice, and you can vote even for Marian Kotleba, because in democratic country it is possible. You have this right to do that, and this is freedom. Of course, if this case that fascists or communists can seize power, or Viktor Orban is abusing power, destroying the media in your country, or Vladimir Putin is being elected all the time. He's ruling for more years than most of the kings of Hungary and Austria. How is that possible? How can he be the fair guys? So if you want to change country, you should go there and go and elect and change it. So in this way, if there is equality, you can create justice. Justice creates legal system and legal laws and acts. So it creates balance between president, the king, the monarch, the parliament, the people, the left, the right, the conservatives, liberals, fascist, communists, and UFOs, and so on. And it creates kind of ethics in here, that we respect each other. We can be tolerant. Of course, intolerant to intolerance, but in this way, we can give chance to speak up, to talk, to discuss. And we create system that is ethical in this way. Saving somebody's be respectful with some social, civic, political equality, respect to the others, help to the poor, to people who are disadvantaged. And from here, you have some fair justice election, fair rights. And if there are fair rights, you have equality, and you have this system that is working in maybe in Scandinavia, but not in many countries. Since you have social injustice, you have crisis, economic crisis, attempt to keep the power for yourself, for some political party, you have war, you have conflict. You have to remember this, guys. Okay, so in this way, there is basic so-called separation of powers, and this basic idea in democratic state that you have, like in ancient Roman Republic, executive power and legislative power, the Senate and the consuls, and it's divided. Once Gaius Julius Caesar unite these functions, political rights together, he became dictator. And this is the thing. But when you divide it, because they had some checks and balances, only for half year you can deny him. You got tribune of the people. That's why they divided the House of Commons and then House of Lords. Then you have the executive, which is government, so the prime minister. But still, you have the crown, and each other controls the other. And eventually, you have also the highest supreme code of laws, which are the best judges who decide whether some acts are against the Bill of Rights or against the Constitution, Slovak Constitution, and so on. But who picks these judges? The president, the parliament. In each country it is different, and there must be general agreement of political parties, of the parliament members, that can be like fighting for the rights, for the justice, that it cannot be broken. That's why it is very important, guys, that in the times when Robert Fico was prime minister, they had dominance in parliament, this part, Thus, they ruled this part, they had this government, and even Gasparovich was president. They ruled all these parts, even they had judges in here, including Harabi. And that was very important that suddenly people in presidential election voted Andrei Kiska. This party was not very popular among many people. They wanted to change this balance. And suddenly Andrei Kiska started to make obstacles for appointing judges in here. And he actually blocked, vetoed many decisions. And suddenly these judges are like half to half, so they can discuss. And suddenly Robert Fico didn't have servants in all the political institutions. So it's very important that there is balance between all these forms, and you will see it in America, you will see it in Britain, in France too. Once somebody may overrule government, parliament, and Supreme Court, he can be the dictator, or she can be the dictator. That's why even the crown, the queen, respects this role of Bill of Rights of equality, and that is very important. Once the king would be like Charles I, he may be executed, there may be civil war, there may be another revolution. In this case, in Britain, they started this basic division of conservatism and libertarianism, but later on, with adding American political institutions and French ideas of revolution, adding with Industrial Revolution and adding this socialistic or leftist, but they also moved to very radical authoritarian, to Marxism, Leninism, to communism, but even to anarchism that is very free for everybody. Again, on the right side of the spectre, you may have people who are either conservatives or liberals, but it's so close between them. But when in the radical authoritarian, they can be fascists. If you are on the other side, you just are liberal, you abolish the state and police and anarcho-capitalism. You know, so it's very difficult, and you can actually make these quizzes, so-called political compass. So when you click it, you have, I believe it will be working fast since we have better internet connection than during the previous lesson. So you can just click it and you will see how I'll try to quit this. Okay, let's make some ideas. I believe I can show you some pictures. Okay, someone liked my YouTube video. I don't care. Okay, but the point is that in this you can just take the quiz, take the test in which you have like the economic globalization is inevitable. It should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I don't know, I disagree, agree, okay, strongly agree. And you just go various questions about politics, about ethics, and so on. And eventually they picked you this political compass in the way that in which form, which part of the political compass you are in. I believe that I can give this to you for the next lesson, for your homework, or at the lesson, we will see. I'm not decided yet, I don't know. So in this way, you can even compare your results with some famous personalities. Like many people said that I'm centrist, like here. But actually their opinions will move you somewhere to here, even to here, and maybe you may be surprised. Many people believe that they are liberals, but they are much more to the left. It depends. That's why even some of my former students, they were not happy about this, and you may know another so-called 9-axis quiz, and it was a big nice surprise because when I asked him like Ekiko, so make this, so he was moved even more to the far right than to centrist. And there are actually many things concerning progress, equality, freedom, security, isolation, globalism, democracy, religion, secularism, and so on. So you can take also this quiz. It's much longer, and you may not like the scores, but it will actually show you so where probably you are, and it can help you with your political preferences, and even maybe to support from Marian Kotleba to radicals to Luboš Blah, whoever you want. Of course, I would be happy if you pick up something that would be for tolerance, democracy, and actually knowing the system, how it works, because some parties are fighting against this system, against this division of the power, and we can, thanks to history, you can analyze it, you can respect it. If you are more interested with, watch these John Green's crash course videos about English Civil War, Industrial Revolution, 2 videos, and about capitalism and socialism. We will analyze it next school year and talk about world wars and terrible revolutions and new totalitarian regimes that we shall compare, and it would be like final climax for all of these. Okay, so that's all from me, guys, for this topic. And you know what? That's all from me for this lesson, because last lesson were really long. So that's why we have only this 50 minutes long lesson. So that's all from me, guys, for today. So keep safe. I believe that you will have chance to go for vaccination. I had shot for the second dose of vaccine, and that's probably the only way we can do this these days. Of course, from wearing scarves and masks and so on. So, guys, stay negative in tests, positive in mind, and I believe to see you soon at school, guys. So, bye bye. Have a nice day.